out of the gate, what did you think about sort of the tough tone that President Biden took towards what needs to happen with the court? Some of his words saying what's happening with the court right now is not normal.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that he is correct. I mean, having a recent opinion earlier this month where six justices on the Supreme Court effectively sanctioned, permitted presidential wrongdoing because they believe that a president is above the law, that is not normal. In the past, we had cases from Nixon to Clinton to even some of the earlier Trump taxes cases that were unanimously decided against a president. So this is a that case was obviously a turning point for President Biden. It's been reported that he spoke to Supreme Court expert Larry Tribe, who was President Obama's Harvard law professor, after that decision came out. The Trump v. U.S. decision came out on July 1st, and that I think sort of helped cement his views on what reform needs to look like. And look, I'm very pleased that he has chosen two of the reforms that I've been championing for the better part of a decade: 18-year term limits for Supreme Court justices and an enforceable ethics code.
Is there any reason that either party should be opposed to this? I mean, the majority of the American public has a crisis in confidence with the court and a lot of the decisions that have rolled back precedent and what is currently a conservative supermajority that has moved from the moderate middle. Is there any reason that either the Republicans or the Democrats should feel that term limit or an ethics code would be sort of a negative for the court?
Yeah, I mean, look, these are very moderate proposals, and these are proposals that polling that I started doing 10 years ago, 80% of Americans identifying as liberals and conservatives support. 18-year term limits just mean more regularity to the Supreme Court appointment process. If, God forbid, Sam Alito died tomorrow, he'd be replaced by a liberal. And just like when Antonin Scalia died, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Antonin Scalia was not replaced by a liberal. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, she was holding on, so Alito and Thomas theoretically right now are holding on to a point in time in which a president with whom they agree sits in the White House. Similarly, Justice Ginsburg waited for a president with whom she agreed to sit in the White House, and so did Justice Scalia, and it didn't work out for the two of them. But it could work out for Alito and Thomas, and this idea that there's a Scalia seat or a Ginsburg seat or a Thomas seat or a Alito seat. That's not how it should be. These are seats that belong to the American people, and having a justice pick their successor shouldn't be kosher. And we should just have a regular rotation of of the justices. There's no sort of extra, out of this world judicial or legal insight that any justice gets by getting crusty and serving on the court for 30 or 35 years, as is becoming the norm. Having justices that reflect modern times, whether those times are liberal or conservative, I think is critical. And currently having a justice in Justice Thomas, just to give the most obvious example, because he served on the court the longest, who was put into his office by someone who left the presidency on January 20th, 1993, when I was 10, doesn't make a lot of sense. So, these proposals are politically neutral. It's not something that you might hear from someone like, say, Mitch McConnell, but over time, even in the short term, term limits would not favor one party or another. Neither would ethics reform. I mean, having a complaint process for the justices wouldn't favor one side or the other. It's just, I don't know, be ethical, and then you have nothing to worry about.
Yeah, there's no benefit or practicality that most experts see in not having, for example, an ethics code for the Supreme Court, or also, speaking of not normal, most other countries don't have lifetime appointments for the highest court in the land, which is an undemocratic institution of all of the most undemocratic of all of our
Yeah.
institutions, in that you have a lifetime appointment. Nobody's elected to this position. And as you said, it's very politicized. So the idea that we are an outlier in sort of the Western world and democratic societies in the way the Supreme Court has recently also held undue influence, disproportionate sway over our legislature, even the executive branch. Do you feel like there's any, the idea that an ethics code is necessary? Why would there be any opposition to that?
Yeah, no, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And look, I mean, I think there might be an argument from the left saying these reforms don't go far enough. They're not disempowering reforms to the extent that certain things like maybe jurisdiction stripping or even court expansion might be. Personally don't like court expansion. I think it's sort of accedes to the notion that we're a juristocracy, and just like six conservative justices are saying how things should be now, then maybe seven liberal justices or 27 liberal justices, I don't know, would sort of, lead the country in terms of politics and policy. I'd rather it be the people through our elected representatives who do that. That's why I don't like court expansion. But in terms of ethics specifically, yeah, there really shouldn't be any opposition. And if you look at the history of this issue, during the post-Watergate period, when there was a lot of good government reforms, the Ethics in Government Act passed with bipartisan majorities, and that was an ethics reform where lower court judges had some say and sway over how financial disclosure reports for the justices were filled out. So, that's sort of an ethics enforcement mechanism that exists to this day that is carried out by lower court judges. And there is even another one that what happens now when you file a complaint against a lower court judge is that a council of the judge's peers will adjudicate it and say, I mean, 98% of them are frivolous. So, don't get me wrong, this is not, a huge problem. But about 1,400 are filed each year, and you have a council of, if it's meritorious, the dozen or so that are meritorious, you have a council of the judge's peers that are deciding, okay, does someone need to return a gift? Does someone need to recuse from a case? Does someone need to take ethics training classes? Putting the justices into a rubric like that was actually envisioned at the time of this post-Watergate changes, but the justices successfully 45 years ago lobbied against their inclusion in the bill. Hopefully that wouldn't happen again, but bipartisan majorities passed a bill. Again, President didn't end up signing it, House didn't end up passing it, but bipartisan majorities passed a bill that would have that ethics requirement, that sort of judicial council adjudication that I described, apply to the justices. There's no reason we can't bring it back. It seems like President Biden wants to bring it back. It seems like, who by the way, voted for that bill back in 1977. Justice Kagan last Thursday said she would also similarly like to see a committee of judges that, when a complaint arises, would look into whether or not a justice has in fact violated their oath of office or violated the ethics canon. So it's not hard to do, and the opposition is just seemingly grasping at straws, because it's really not any sort of, it would be a major change in that nothing is, like this has happened before, but in terms of the structure of the court, it wouldn't really change anything.